Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good day. Welcome to our new edition of Life Matters. I hope you enjoy the series of shows. We will take you through medical and educational parenting content that will help you. We're splitting the health show and the Parenting Today show into one, and we're making it about how life matters to you. I'm Gouwah Solomon. Stay with me for the next hour, inshallah, as we educate you about the education system and any sort of issues, challenges, potholes that you have with a child that is possibly having challenges at school. So we talk about intervention in this series. Hopefully we can create a series of the show with our occupational therapist based out here in the Western Cape. We have Yasierah, Adonis and Lynedall Johnson, OTs, within the Western Cape Education Department doing their job, and we're going to find out a little bit of a background from them, and then we'll get into the topic, inshallah. Welcome, ladies. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Gouwah. Nice seeing you again. It's been a while.
Yes, it's been a while, so let's get this ball rolling, because we've been planning this, and we need this sort of information for our parents, our educators, and the appreciation, of course, for our kids in the long term. So Lynedall Johnson, occupational therapist, also been around doing this for the past 13 years, interventions and helping those kids that are challenging. We're going to get into a bit of what you do. But let's start firstly, Lynedall, let's start with you. Tell us a bit about your background. Let our viewers get to know you a little bit. The work that you do, why you do what you do, and on a daily basis, what you do.
Yeah, I'm Lynedall Johnson, and I'm an occupational therapist. It's been probably 16 years, occupational therapy. I'm currently working at Oasis Special School, and that is a school for children with severe to moderate intellectual disability. And that's out in Belhar area. And we service your not so affluent areas such as Delft, West Bank, Belleville, those areas. And so it's usually for children that needs to access in education system. And then a little bit more about myself. I'm passionate. I love what I do. A little bit personal for myself. I also have a close family member that's also has a disability. And that just pushed me to advocate all the time. And so my passion is advocacy, creating awareness, such as these platforms. And that's why I chose occupational therapy, which in my opinion is a vast array of opportunities that you can just explore on and get into. So there's lots of work to be done. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I'm very excited to also meet you. And I did a little bit of a bio. You describe yourself as a futurist. I want to get into that and the mindset around that. But of course, to the viewers, I know Yasierah very well. Yasierah Adonis, occupational therapist. She's worked with my son as well many years back. Love the work that you do. You work within the government system, the district, as a district therapist for Metro North. I know that's a little bit of a stretch for some people, but just give us some brief on what you do and who you are as an individual.
Shukran, Gouwah. So what many parents out there won't know is that the child that goes to a school belongs to a certain district, right? And so if I live in the Grassy Park, Mitchells Plain, Wynberg, Ocean View area, and that's the stretch, then it's the Metro South District. So I'm responsible for all the therapists in the Metro North District. So we span from Delft, what's it called?
So it's Delft. It will be Westbank. It will be
Blikkiesdorp, Umfeleni, all the way down to Atlantis.
Wow.
And then the Goodwood area and Valhalla.
N1 as well. So N2, sorry.
It's a massive district.
But last I heard you were in Ocean View.
Correct, and I was the head of department there, and then so got the promotion post. Very lovely. I have 26 therapists within my district,
Wow.
and they range from schools like Oasis to Athlone School for the Blind, Robin Hill, which is similar to Oasis. But then we have specific schools, and that would be Karel de Tooy for the hard of hearing and our deaf learners. And then we have Tafelberg for your learners with specific learning difficulties. That would be your apraxia, ADHD, so the range is so wide that we need to be, and we say, up it, because the lingo needs to resonate with the people that we deal with on the ground. And so my role within the district is to ensure that they are professionally sound all the time. So that kind of supervision. But more importantly, what are the therapy programs within the district that would enable our children, be it in the mainstream or in the special schools, that we find them to actually access the curriculum. And Lynedall is going to speak a bit about that, how it works within a school, because with Lynedall, we also have inclusive education teams. Two, based one at Athlone School, one at Filia. And so they have a different role and function. Then on top of that, we have outreach. And then we have foci for the province, and that would be parent intervention, play therapy, looking at different modalities of ensuring that what we're doing is actually transferable. Because a child can come to therapy, we can do our thing, make our magic, but can the child transfer that skill over in the classroom? Can the parent gain from that and say, at home, how do we forward what is happening in the classroom? So it's a lovely program, but what it does take from everybody in the system is values, caring, creating the opportunity. And most of the time, it's easier to box children than provide them that opportunity. We've had a growth spurt now with ASD, so autistic spectrum, autism spectrum disorder, and so Lynedall manages, that at her institution, and our waiting list is not looking bright. It's now a database because there are viable candidates for a program. Right? So it's no longer a waiting list, it's a database. They just need to be placed. But finding, the resources within our system tends to be challenging at times.
So talk to me about your team. We have, fortunately, Lynedall with us. And when you do intervention, there is, of course, a range of skills that are needed from individuals. You being an occupational therapist, I'm sure there's an educational psychologist involved there, another speech therapist or whatever. So talk to us about the team when intervention is implemented.
So Lynedall can speak from the team when it comes to being school-based. You must remember we have school-based therapists. Then we have myself that's at the district office, and then I have inclusive education teams. So their role mainly would be, when it started off, when we looked at the system and we started with inclusive education teams, their main role and function was to look at our underperforming schools. So you'll hear about Litnum. Lynedall will speak about literacy and numeracy a bit later. Why is it important for the learner even though they're in a special school? But we have since progressed from looking at underperforming schools, and now we have what we call full service schools, which means that even though your child has any of the diagnoses or disabilities that we view as a barrier to learning within the system, they don't necessarily have to go to a special school. We can accommodate for them at a public ordinary school. And when we have identified these learners as LSEN in the mainstream, so learners with special educational needs, LSEN, in the mainstream, the inclusive education team that consists of a speech therapist, occupational therapist, and a psychometrist, that would be the one team. The other team as a learning support educator would literally go in, do the assessments, look at an individual support plan. So what is the ISP of this learner? Then once that is done, individual support plan. We even have group support plans. So we have GSPs, but they go in with the main aim to look at how do we accommodate for this child in his environment. So what does Batupele say? Take the service to the child. Don't uproot the child and send him to a boarding school where he's going to. So we look at all those things. So policy is very important, and I know a lot of people get irritated with policy, but it does serve as a framework to work in. So to what extent can we support this child? We'll speak about loan centers a bit later. So let's say the learner is visually impaired, right? But all he needs is a Prodigy 12, just so that he can see better in the classroom. He doesn't necessarily need to go to Athlone School for the Blind, which is a special school. So how do we make that happen in the system? So obviously we have to follow the paperwork because there's money involved, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the public funds are managed in the correct manner. And so because we ex officio, of the department. So when they go in, they do the assessment. There's an array of things that they do, but let's focus on the one learner. Then with the educator, and we'll speak about the CS policy a bit later, with the educator, identify, so in which areas does he struggle the most? Where do we need to, and we don't really want to use our jargon, but where can we assist with this learner? And so they do the assessments. I obviously get the reports, but then they go back and they have a discussion with the school-based support team because now it becomes a school effort. We now need to support this learner as a school, and they would then put interventions in place. We would have what we call a bi-weekly rotation where they would go in and say, is it happening? What is happening? But at the same time, training and development takes place so that we can actually step out. Lynedall spoke about it earlier. So by that time, when they are a full-service school, that full-service school can assist a neighboring school. So it's all about transferring the skills that we have so that it doesn't sit with a body of professionals that you need to call on all the time.
Because at the end of the day, people need to also understand it. And when you treat them as an outsider, it makes sort of the situation worse. And I think this is where I'd like to bring you in, Lynedall, to actually look through some of the work that you guys do. When you do go with your team, what is the process? Let's say day one.
Yeah, so a day one, when we step out into the mainstream schools, we look at, or rather, let me backtrack. Before we go into the schools, we would already know what the needs of the school is. We always work from what is the needs of a particular school, because no two schools are the same. Doesn't matter if they have the same staff establishment, the environment is different, what they have and available, and the knowledge that the teachers or the staff have is different. So we always work from what is the needs of that specific schools, what's the needs of that specific schools, and then also then going out and say, okay, making contact with the principal, making contact with the staff, and ascertaining from them how often we can come into the schools, because we cannot take for granted that we just enter into a school because you need help. Okay, so we need to allow them to also have that space of, okay, we can make time for you to actually come in, spend some time with us. We normally earmark a school for a term, and what our focus is our grade ones, all right? And you may ask, why grade ones? It's because on various levels. So it's because most of our children may not have had access or stimulation prior to grade one. So what is that child actually coming into the classroom with? All right, so you can put your mind around that already. Then also, some of our kids haven't been to a creche. They haven't been to they've probably been looked after by grandma, grandpa, which is great. At least they had someone to look after. But then, what basis have that child are they coming into the school system with? So we earmark our grade ones, and these classes are usually full. It's
overfilled.
Overfilled. And so you can imagine the big work the teachers have. So we also come in as a support for the teachers. So indirectly we work with the children, but directly we work with the teachers, because we know that if we can get the teacher on board and we can transfer the skills to the teacher, whichever grade 1 learner comes through that teacher's hands, they can possibly then use that skills with those learners. So when we come in, we do demonstrative sessions, and we also have reflective sessions as well with the teachers, and say, okay, we've done these demonstrative sessions, and what did you actually learn from these? What did you take out? What is your take home from this demonstrative lesson that you've seen, which we value, because sometimes something is presented to you and all these thoughts are going through your mind. I wonder why they did that, and I wonder why they did that. But they don't have an opportunity to reflect on what they've seen. And then thereafter, we then say, okay, you can then now have an opportunity to demonstrate a session to us. And so there we see what the teacher's skills are, where they can, for example, improve, or what we can add to their toolbox. We don't look at a teacher as you know nothing. That's never out, because I mean, all of us have different skills. And so we say, what can we add to your toolbox? And also speaking the teachers' lingo and language, and not coming with that power, because we can. People can quickly become intimidated once you hear you want out your speech or that. So really just working and making eye contact and saying, look, I'm here for you.
So that's interesting that comes in, because as an individual, you sort of look at the skills first, and then you think, oh, this person's coming. I mean, unfortunately, we're individuals, we're human beings at the end of the day. We're thinking they're coming to take over that, but it's sort of the mindset to understand that they come with a different skill set to assist and help, because at the end of the day, I'm still with that child, and the same with the parents. So to be asking individuals like yourselves questions, rather to support what they're already doing. So I'm so glad that therapists like yourselves come in, and I'm sure that's added to the training when they do come into the skills, is not just to come into a school and think that I'm going to do a job and off I go. Your individuality comes in as well, so it's a coherent way forward. I think what we're going to do is just quickly take a break, and my idea of the show was actually turned completely around now when I looked at we're going to do intervention and try and find solutions for the children, but we have to establish a base, and that's what we're doing, and I'm loving the conversation and where it's going. So please stay with us. We'll chat to our OT team, head of the district Metro North section here in the Western Cape, and look at, I think this is intervention, but it's intervention part 1 when it comes to our young little ones out in school. But stay with us, we'll talk more just after this. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. A very good day to you. This is Life Matters, and we talk in this edition on education, but somehow also to deal with the parenting issue. It's very important that teacher and educator works together, but specifically with the children having some sort of challenges at school, and hopefully to try and pick it up as early as possible. We spoke a little bit about grade 1s and how important their placements are, how ready they are with going to school, but let's delve into the nitty-gritties of intervention and what really does happen to school when children do have some challenging issues with the occupational therapist team. We have Yasierah Adonis, who is the district therapist for the Metro North region here out in the Western Cape, and I have Lynedall Johnson, who is an OT, also practicing for the past 13 years. Welcome back, ladies. We took a quick short break, and with that, hopefully we can get into the gist of where your team, of course, as we spoke earlier on, is at, and what how they work in combination with the educator to make the whole process smooth and comfortable as well. Because you have to take personal relations into cognizance. So I want to just quickly come back to you, Yasierah, and look at the sort of training besides being an OT, because they have the necessary skills, the interpersonal training that they have to have with working with the different individuals going out to the school systems.
You know, how are you, as you're saying it, and I'm smiling, and the reason why I'm smiling is that's literally how therapists are trained.
Okay.
So you will never see me having training about building relationships, because the core criteria before we engage with an educator, parent, a learner, it would be a client in a different setting, would be to build an interpersonal relationship before anything else takes place. And so that's one of our foundations, understanding the human being, the environment, and the context in which they function. So what is it? Hypothetically, let's say a little one comes in, we need to do an assessment. The child vehemently says, I don't want to, don't touch me. We would have really asked the mother, gathered collateral information. What's his favorite cartoon? Which superhero does he like? And then we'll be like, I don't know how Superman works. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And so automatically it's like, you must bend the arm this way, and it doesn't fly like that. And so gradually that would take place. But it's not, even if we're looking at schools, but I want Lynedall to speak about outreach specifically, because she would essentially, I have inclusive education conferences, so in the different regions within North, and we look at all schools coming. So we don't function in a model where it's for special schools only. You must remember, we're looking at being able to transform the system that any school can accommodate any diagnoses and any kind of disability. And that's the intent moving forward. We have a long way to go, but we've started. We're making the effort. The same would be with educators. You wouldn't come in and say, well, you don't know how to do perceptual training. We're here to do it for you. This is what you must look out for. We would literally ask educators, so what are the areas that is difficult to identify? And we would teach them screening skills, observation skills. Look at the little one. How are they moving? What are they doing in the classroom that signals a red flag for you? Because your ADHD kid is going to be your ADHD kid. And then for some odd reason, they're the one that the teacher picks out. But functionally, they're meeting the requirements within the grade.
Yeah, very true.
So we don't do training around, we would do interpersonal skills if we're bringing together different entities, so collaboration, so educators, us, our circuit-based support teams, our district-based support teams, circuit managers are invited. But most of the time when that happens, it's with the school governing bodies.
Okay.
You must remember they ultimately responsible for how the school is governed, what resources are available. So in that aspect, yes, we would do that kind of training.
So Lynedall, when you do go out, you have your team and you have to now create that relationship between yourself and the educator, but then there's also the child, as Yasierah have mentioned, and the approaching, and then the parent as well. Talk about that relationship and how do you guys start building that?
Yeah,
and
so
appreciating the individuality as well.
Yes, so as I said previously, it is the schools are different. But also each learner is different. You cannot use the same paintbrush for each and every learner. And they also don't present the same way. So when we in the classroom, a lot of the times it's the learner. And sometimes we find that these learners, they are withdrawn. They usually have low self-esteem for various reasons, and sometimes because they know that they are not coping, you know. So how do you make a connection with that child? And so most of our trainings or most of our interactions is play-based, because that's where you catch a child. So it's play-based, it's having fun, it's laughing, it's making yourself being a character yourself, and acting in a way that the child sort of relates to. And so after the session you'd find, but now the child's smiling and they can now achieve, because in a game there's rules, but there's no right way always of, you know, achieving the end goal. So now you've got the child that is usually like that you would have been withdrawn, but now they're having fun and they're laughing, and now you've got your way in. And when you've got that way in, then the child is relaxed, and then you see here are symptoms that may be highlighted or may be seen, because now the child is not sitting and not showing anything, but now they're open and you see what the teacher is actually speaking about. Yeah. And then from there we work, and we usually come in with a program, and then even though we've got a set program, we adjust it according to the classroom and according to the resources. We also give or provide kits, because the schools that we manage or we go into usually don't have any resources. So we provide them with kits, but we also say this is not the be all and end all. So we use things like sarcastic stones, things that's readily available, toilet rolls, recycling material. So we, what's the new word? Upcycle. So we upcycle and we use what's in the community, because reality is when we leave or when the kit that we provided breaks, what then? Yeah. So we need to say, but it's okay if you use a sarcastic, a toilet roll, bottle tops, and so on. Then we've got the parents. So we bring in the parents. Usually it's less frequent, so the teacher will see once a week, and the parents will bring in for in that whole term probably twice. Okay. But it will also be on a needs basis. What do the parents need, and what we've picked up as trends, or having already worked with the children. So we work with the children, we see this is what the trends are, and then we bring in the parents. We usually recommend offering coffee, tea, and so on. I mean, anyone relaxes after a cup of tea, don't you think so? Yeah. We set the scene, and then parents open up, and it's a...
But is it a conversation like you bring in the child, you bring in the parent, like in a setting where, like, I'm going for an appointment, like it's almost as if I'm going to the principal's office, you know, because my child is a problem, you know? That's the premise that the parents comes in with.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. No. Yes.
So I would explain to us quickly the environment, the setting, and the conversations you have with the parents.
So we invite them on a basis of, this is a meet and greet. This is a meeting where we're going to share some skills that is relevant for your child in terms of the child development. So we come from that point of view. And the necessity of a child developing and reaching the milestones when they should. And also highlighting some red flags that is important for parents to identify when they feel that the child is struggling. And then also referral pathways. So if my child has a hearing a problem or eyesight problem, where to refer them to. So we don't just provide them with the information, but also referring agents that they can access. And if we have to, we do some referral letters as well, because sometimes our parents sit for hours, even sometimes days, just waiting for an appointment. So we try and make it easier, because usually we as health professionals working in the education sector know health professionals working in the health departments. So we then make that connection and say, hey, Yasierah working in the hospital, won't you just help these 10 learners? I'm sending them, what is your most available time slot? So we make it that in that way easier. And so it's important for us as health professionals to keep that connections amongst the different departments, whether it's health and or education.
Or social even.
Yeah, and then started coming back to the parents, also preventing lingo, because we can often get stuck with the lingo about and the different pronunciations and the acronyms and so on. But when we present a workshop or information session, it is usually discussion based. It is usually interactions, role plays, and then also time for what to do next, because we can give the information, but we also need to action it. What next?
I want to come back to the lingo. I want to come back to some stats, Yasierah. I want to come back to some of your support teams beside your therapists, organizations. Who do you guys latch on? After the short break, stay with us. We're chatting to a team of occupational therapists here in the Western Cape, handling the district, the North, Metro North, out in the Western Cape, and how possibly you can learn from this system and assist your child at home. And hopefully this can be a series as well to take forth, because we have children challenged in different areas in the schooling system, in their ages and their gaps, and to remember that you as a parent is the feather on top, like say the cap on top, because it starts with you at home. More just after the short break. Welcome back, Assalamu alaikum. And when they say time flies when you're having fun, and I didn't think that I'd have fun with occupational therapists, but I am just learning about the systems that they have in place. There's so much detail that I think we need to establish, instead of just saying, oh no, my child has a possible issue or concern at school and I need to tell the teacher. But when you tell the teacher, this is where they come in. The teacher has to do assessments. The teacher has to look at the child, different aspects of where they're having the issues, and then paperwork needs to be done. And then, of course, the educational department can actually come in and do some intervention. And this is why we have our guest in studio with us, a therapist for the Metro North. She is heading plus minus, I think she mentioned 26 therapists that she's managing to hopefully handle the necessary capacity that the school system needs from them. Occupational therapists, speech therapists, psychometrists. I still wanted to get into that, psychometrist. Very interesting team there. So Yasierah, and we also have in studio with us Lynedall Johnson, both occupational therapists, but I must say varies in the degrees and skills that they have, alhamdulillah. So I think Yasierah, if we can sort of look at besides the team that you work with, the support systems that are needed for certain individual interventions, organizations, other departments possibly, because there could be a social issue with a child where a social worker might be called in, and then also the psychometrist. The psychometrist, what is that?
So a psychometrist is an educator that has gone to further their studies, and so normally when they qualify and become an educational psychologist, they can administer the JSIs and the SIs, etc. and so on. A psychometrist,
SIs.
So the junior assessment tool and the adult assessment tool. We're not very familiar with those because we don't use that for our assessments. But psychometrists are those that didn't complete their masters. So they have the, I think it's an undergraduate degree, and so they are only able to do testing to a certain extent and a certain level. So they can't write report, they can't do the diagnoses, but they can look at the child and assess them and say, look, these are the areas identified. So it would look at the language skills, their social skills. Scholastic. So the same kind of assessments that a psychologist, educational psychologist would have done. But they would write the report, provide the support, but obviously an educational psychologist function goes above and beyond, where they would say, we can see he does have ADHD and actually make that recommendation.
So let's get into the support structures that you have at hand if needed.
So I'm their support structure at the district, but if we look at our component, which is learner support, they changed it from SLES to learner support, which I think is more inclusive also at the end of the day. Then we have our pillar head, and she, well, it can be here as well, but in our district, Carola Peterson is our pillar head, and under her would be her managers, which is myself with therapy, Gwen, that would head psychology, so she's the senior psychologist. We'll have Jessica that heads social work, and then we have Nonkoos that would head learning support. So should we require intervention, those three components remember my people sit in schools. Those three components, they form what we call circuit-based support teams. So Lynedall School will have a circuit-based support team attached to the school.
Okay.
And that includes a psychologist, social worker, and a learning support advisor. So should social work issues come up, and we'll speak about that process. I'm not sure that we have enough time.
No, not today.
But there's an actual process that has to take place, be it at a special school or a public ordinary school. And they would then come in and ensure that the documentation up until a certain point is completed, and then from that point come to the district office, and we then, let's for a lack of a better word, deploy and say, you need to take that up, that child needs to be assessed, etc., and so on. And so normally what happens in public ordinary schools, because there isn't a therapist attached to a circuit-based support team, my therapist would then go out and do the assessment. And it's not just the inclusive education teams. All my therapists go out and do assessments.
Okay, so there is quite a good support base for you if there are other needs.
Yeah, but Gouwah, you asked about other organizations.
Yes.
So we do interact with DSD because there are certain issues that
Department
of Social Development. So we do interact with them. I serve on the Mental Health Forum for my substructure in the north, but because we've had an increase and an influx of teenagers and adolescents being diagnosed with mental disorders. And so we see this play out in the school. The latest stats, which we wouldn't have because they fluctuate so often. So to come to you and say, you know, we've had an increase of 10% of children with ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, that have come into the system, we can't say that because the stat will say this today at the end, the tally says 10. Next week, we have 15 on our waiting list. So we need to be involved. And I think the transdisciplinary approach is working within the Western Cape because we actually have, and I chair one of those chambers, where all the departments, so all the arms of the department is there, education, transport, health, DSD, you know, and so we can talk about issues that impact not only a sector, but all arms of government. And so the support is there. Resourcing, funding is a completely different story.
Okay, we won't get into that. There's definitely no time for that. But alhamdulillah, I'm so glad you created this awareness of the in-depth structures of support that you have available, and that our viewers can actually understand sort of what goes into my child is needing an assessment.
Yeah.
So let's look at some stats, and hopefully we can get some information over to our parents as a support for them to get the ball going. Any of you can maybe just relay on a ratio of kids in grade 1, maybe at one school, mainstream school, that you're dealing with on a monthly basis, maybe?
Yeah, that's needing support. So I would say out of a class that would be, for example, sitting with 40 children, out of that would be about, say, 15 that's needing some
Quite
sort of information, support and assessment. And so the first is that the teacher needs to identify, and then it needs to go through to the learning support educator, who then completes forms, and then that goes, it's a long process. That's a segment on its own. But what I'm trying to say is that the learner needs to be identified. That is the most important.
And the educator has the skills to do that.
And the educator has more than enough. They're actually brilliant in identifying.
Okay, and this needs to be done in grade 1 already. What happens if it comes up in grade 3 or?
We've had those. So it can be picked up in grade 1, but we've also throughout. It doesn't mean that you haven't picked it up in grade 1. You cannot pick it up in grade 5 even. We've even had that. Pick it up in grade 5. Or there's been, the teachers have picked it up, but it may have not been as prevalent. And in grade 5, with all the amount of work, the workload and so on, now it actually becomes like, no, this child is not coping. So
when is it? I know this is a question to ask much later, but when is it too late? Is it ever too late?
I don't believe it's too late.
Never too
No,
late.
we don't believe that it's ever too late. There's always some sort of support. We even have adults that is, or not adults, I'm saying in high school, where we look at a program in a high school as well to support that learner. And then obviously there'll be support afterwards as well.
What ages and grades does your department deal with?
All ages and all grades.
No matter if they're at high school as well.
Doesn't matter.
So we even have full service high schools. So my team would go in and look at. Now you must remember, then the ball game changes. So what are my aspirations? How am I going to achieve it?
Wow.
What are study methods? So there is no cut-off date, at least not in North. And I don't think other districts in the Western Cape either.
I think the important take-home is, for parents from this point of view, is and for this viewing should be that there is help for your child. It may not be as quick as you want it to be, because we do, like Yasierah said earlier, we are sitting with under-resourced or not too. There's so much work and too little hands, but there is support. Make contact with the various districts if you need to, and they will make contact with the various support structures that needs to go out. So there is help.
So I'm not going to even go about talking about the process, because that parents have to sort of experience for themselves. Let's talk about the possible challenges, the big question of the show to go forward with. What are the most common possible challenges that the educators do pick up?
Oh, you mean for the little ones? So most of the time, single-handedly, it's an OT assessment, because they're moving around, they can't write, they're struggling with tone, so they're bumping into things, they can't identify what is being written on the board. And so when we do an OT assessment, we will find out we have perceptual delays in certain areas. Most of the time, they're just kind of normal developmental delays that we're going to pick up. So your 5 and 2s are going to be reversed. Your B and your Ds. So it's not things that impacts the learner to such an extent that he cannot function within the classroom. So you have a lot of...
I think the other ones is also language. We struggle with language barriers, number one.
Because they have a home language.
They've got a specific home language, and the language of teaching may be different. Or we're sitting with, I want my child in an English class, but I'm actually speaking, which is not a problem, but it creates a challenge within the school system. And the child is hearing at home an Afrikaans, for example, but at school it is English, for example. So there becomes that conflict, and then we're also looking at
Hold that thought. Sorry. Hold that thought. We're just literally scraping the iceberg. We're going to get back to that iceberg and scrape a little bit more when it comes to intervention just after the short break. Stay with us. Thanks. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good day to wherever you are. This is Life Matters. And in these segments, we talk about parenting, education, health even, specifically intervention. And like I said earlier on, we're just scratching the surface, and we're going to be doing that in the last few minutes of the show, literally scratching the surface when it comes to intervention. I've heard some acronyms, some conditions earlier on from our OTs that I didn't even know exist as ODD. What was it? Opposition defiant disorder. Oh my goodness, a disorder, so it can be worked through. So there's so much more that we, and tone issues. I think as parents, we don't even know what is tone, if there's an issue in our child. So much more to touch on within the OT industry. So alhamdulillah, Yasierah and Lynedall is here with us, and hopefully we going to have a series, and I'm saying this on air, so that's a semi-promise. But Lyndon, I rudely interrupted you earlier on when we needed to take a break. So just on that thought process of the possible conditions that the child might face with, I mean, we're talking about language, we're talking about the just the development issues. So what else is there?
Yeah, then there's also the perceptual issues. So your auditive perceptual, your visual perceptual, where you have your reversals. Then your learning disabilities within the school, so where your child actually struggles to learn. The most important thing is some of these challenges that the learners may face or present with can be supported in a mainstream school, but then you also have those that's very extreme, where they are in a mainstream school, but there's just not enough resources that the child actually needs, and the school can't.
So you'd have to actually find a way to move the child.
Yes. So that's where your referral comes in, either to a full service school where you have on-site, or maybe twice a week you have a learning support teacher that comes and assists the learner, or it will be in a special school where there are not just human resources, but actual physical resources that the child needs. So maybe a take-home for a viewer that's listening now is that you get support within the mainstream school that's available there, and then also within a special school, but that's where your child actually need more than just one thing, that they need multiple support systems to help them function. And I love the program that we have today. It says Life Matters, and I think the thing that resonates with me and with us, even without saying, is that every life matters. And that there is support. And then I also want to just focus quickly on what can parents have a look at home. One, have your child's eyes tested, have your child's hearing tested, and once that's cancelled out, now we can say, okay, now let's carry on referring if the problem still persists. And then also encourage your child to play. Kids learn through play, so just encourage your child to play. They learn through it, they develop. And and also own your sense of parentship or parenthood, because sometimes we allow people to dictate how you need to parent, but you know your child. You know, you've got that sixth sense, and trust that, and work with those that are willing to work with your child.
Time is running up, Yasierah, and I know 2 minutes is not enough to you, but to round up.
But shukran, Gouwah, and it's platforms like these that allow parents out there some sense of calm, because the moment the school calls and says, you need to come see us, your kid isn't doing well, or they're writing it in the report, instinctively as parents we just we lose it. The anxiety creeps in. We start to worry, oh, my child's not going to make it. But I think this platform will just give resonance to the fact that when we do that, it's just so that you can assist us in assisting your child, right? And the support systems within education, regardless of which provincial education department you find yourself in, it is there and it does exist. And we would like to give your viewers the opportunity. How do we then access it? What do we need to do from our side as parents so that we can access the best support for our children within our schools, be it in the public ordinary schools or in your special schools?
Yasierah, Adonis and Lynedall Johnson, we definitely hope to see you soon. Every life does matter on the show, and we hope to take this information further, because it is just the iceberg we're scraping and there's so much more underneath it. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we hope to see you soon for the next intervention show. All the best. Goodbye and assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So there we have it, Lynedall Johnson and Yasierah Adonis in Studio OTs, Lyndon being over 13 years of experience. We had actually 16 years as an occupational therapist, being in the special needs industry as well currently, and we have Yasierah as a district therapist for Metro North here out in the Western Cape. We say thank you to those ladies, and the next show on intervention, so stay tuned, will be coming up soon. Don't miss out. You can also catch our shows on our YouTube channel, Life Matters. But for myself, Gouwah Solomon, wassalamu alaikum and goodbye for now.